still telling a bigger backdrop of the transition between Romans and Christians, and Jews, obviously.
Would I retain your friendship if I became an informant?
To tell me the names of criminals is hardly informing.
They're not criminals, Masala. They're patriots.
Patriots!
Yes, like
Patriots!
I think Weiler's Ben-Hur is very different from DeMille's Ten Commandments, which also shaped my life and my father's, obviously. But they're two very different films. They come from different generations of filmmakers. My father came along at the end of his career, of DeMille's career, made some wonderful pictures for DeMille, made the greatest show on earth, the circus picture, as my dad calls it, and Ten Commandments. Ben-Hur is more of the latter period of Hollywood, sort of begins the second half of the 20th century in Hollywood.
Willie came into my dressing room one night and he said, Chuck, you got to be better in this part. And I said, okay, what can I do? He said, I don't know. He said, I wish I did. He said, if I knew, I'd tell you and you'd do it and that would be fine, but I don't know. That was very tough. I spent a long time with a glass of scotch in my hand after that.
Weiler, in a way, created the modern style of filmmaking that you'll see today in films like The Aviator, where Martin Scorsese uses, and I'm sure he wouldn't be embarrassed to hear me say this, uses techniques that in essence are the kinds of things that William Wyler and people like him began to use. More unusual lighting, dark shadows across someone's face, unusual looks and interesting cutting, upcutting things, not showing the beginnings or the endings of scenes. Those are modern filmmaking techniques, and Wyler and men like him began that.
I remember that in Ben-Hur there was a moment where I come...
They both are. Life has answered you, has it?
Life has been answered.
What really provoked the series of epic Christian origin stories that we had in the 50s and early 60s was
I used to see were black and white, but all of a sudden, you had this huge format, and it just blows you away.
Any biblical epic done in the 1950s was always going out there saying we're the biggest and we're the brightest and we're the most sweeping panorama.
This as a background, and you place these figures in there, and that's something that I had to deal with on Malcolm X. It was a broad scope, huge story, encompassing several years, but we kept that as a background. That was always a background.
had seemed to have captured that particular time extremely well.
The art direction of Edward Carfagno, who did or supervised all that. He was one of MGM's finest, if not their finest art director. He did many films before and afterwards. Carfagno also did the art direction on Quo Vadis for Sam Zimbalist in 1949-1950. So he had some experience with the ancient world, ancient Rome, and again, took it to new levels and standards that are still the highest set in films to this day.
The sense of scale, I believe in total there were over 300 sets. The back wall of the chariot race arena for Ben-Hur was 3 times as high as the biggest part of the set I built for the Colosseum on Gladiator. It's colossal. It really, truly is colossal from a period when that was the target. The greatest film ever made with a cast of thousands, stupendous, all in letters 40 feet high.
The actual arena, which is the long arena, still exists in Rome. And that's 6 times the length of the one I built for Gladiator. So I always was frustrated that I felt Gladiator wasn't big enough. and therefore I always felt that Ben-Hur did actually get that scale.
The circus set, which is a milestone of filmmaking history now, was 2,000 feet long, 650 feet wide, with a central spine that had gigantic statues.
With a picture costing so much and of such a size, all those questions, I suppose, of reality become incredibly important, and because a lot of money's right. When I first came into the film industry, which was about in 1959, then I went up to MGM, the old MGM studios up at Boreham Wood, which is where a lot of American productions were done, or co-productions were done. And I always remember going to the art department, and they had these huge sort of sketches from Ben-Hur in black and white, and they were incredibly impressive, marvelous. Even as sketches, they gave you a whole sort of scope of the film. You know, they really illustrated the film beautifully. Race.
Computer-generated images started to emerge.
One real difference between
I remember distinctly that we had a Roman costume, and I used to put it on and march around the set. And it was a habit that my dad got into. He used to get me a costume for all the different periods of movies that he did. I had a Norman Knights costume and a Civil War soldier's costume and so on and so on. I was the best armed kid on the block.
When I saw Ben-Hur, I didn't know what year it was made. I mean, I knew it was old, but it really stands up to time. It was amazing. The costumes were incredible to me. You know, they really put a lot of thought in the color and the aging and the layering and the texturizing. I was just highly impressed.
I thought the costumes were very good. You know, I can see they're very well done. I think, like everything else in a film, they're convincing. They seem well researched. They are strong. You know, they're strong in shape.
It seemed to start costume design onto a more realistic plane. The films before were very costumey, very stagey. Look at this film, you know, it was as real as it could have been at that time, and you go into the character, you believe everything, you believe every moment, and a lot has to do with costume. It was all very real. I really think that was the first film to go that extra mile.
That depth of detail and research and care. The films that come after that, they had a hard role model to follow, didn't they? That was a hard standard to live up to. Some achieved it, some don't.
When you're
A risky thing in some ways because people had in their minds what they thought these films should look like.
as much emotion as his story as an actor. She's not, you know, a sexy, you know, diva type woman. She's a very caring person. So it's very hard to get a concept of sexy yet subtle yet real. I think Ben-Hur is the first attempt to make something look realistic.
Yes, Master.
Master? What? Giving you your freedom?
It's strange. I hardly felt a slave.
My first impression was, you know, being awestruck. I think it's clear to everyone who's listening to Ben-Hur that they're listening to the work of a master composer who has achieved the pinnacle of his craft.
It doesn't sound like old score. It sounds like today's score.
To walk into the theater and to be confronted with this majestic music, which is actually from the film, you know, to sit down, eat your popcorn, and then, you know, the film starts, but you've already been exposed to the major themes of the movie.
There is rebellion in the wind. It will be crushed.
For any composer, you know, the real grail is that wide canvas.
With the music, it creates that total link in the mind where the visual and the audio come together as one in your brain, and you just sit back and you could feel the ancient world. You could just feel it in the music.
First of all, we don't know how Roman music sounds. We have no idea. There's no documentation. We know how Greek music sounds. Rosa researched and found out that actually Roman culture got a lot of inspiration from Greek. So consequently, he thought that of course also in music. And I think it's very interesting, very detailed, deep research, which who does it today? He had 1 year to do research, to prepare everything. That's a big thing.
I had 10 weeks to score each of the Matrix movies. But that's the most time I've ever had for any film. The shortest amount of time I've had is 2 weeks.
And Miklos Rosa was absolutely the master, not commenting what we see, but go underneath. One thing I noticed seeing the whole movie,
a modern day Rosa brought to the craft.
I was in high school at the time, and I went and saw that film. I saw it twice in a week. It was one of those films that just captured your imagination.
When I first saw the chariot race in Ben-Hur, I was totally blown away by the excitement of it and the intense riding around in the stadium.
And certainly one of the greatest action sequences that ever was on film.
You'd have to remember the chariot races as probably the beginning of racing stuff in films.
Cuts were so impactful and innovative. They were new.